The Amazing Soul, the Vedic Introduction. The Vedic wisdom tradition offers us a coherent, cogent, and extensive body of knowledge about the soul. One of the defining characteristics of the Vedic wisdom tradition in general, and the Bhagavad Gita in particular, is its clear and analytical treatment of the subject of the soul. It does not treat the soul vaguely as a metaphorical reference to our intangible essence. Rather, it presents the soul concretely as a very real spiritual entity with its own distinctive characteristics.
We sometimes say in the West, I have a soul. But I think from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective, it'd be more correct to say, I am the soul and I have a body. The soul is what provides cognition to an awareness to the body, and it's the soul that is the part of us that is aware, that feels.
The Amazing Soul, consciousness personified. Consciousness does not originate in the brain. Then where does it originate? The Bhagavad Gita explains that it originates from the soul.
यथा प्रकाशयत्येकः कृत्स्नं लोकमिमं रविः क्षेत्रं क्षेत्री तथा कृत्स्नं प्रकाशयति भारत.
The Bhagavad Gita 13.34 illustrates the relationship between the soul and consciousness with a vivid example. O son of Bharata, as the sun alone illuminates all this universe, so does the living entity, one within the body, illuminate the entire body by consciousness. This verse indicates that just as the sun illuminates the universe, the soul illuminates the body with consciousness. This implies that just as sunlight is the symptom of the sun, consciousness is the symptom of the soul.
The power of the soul extends throughout the entire body. There's a passage in the Katha Upanishad which describes the soul as like the sun. It illuminates a particular area. Sometimes it's described like a lamp or a candle. It provides, the light of a candle will fill up a room in the same way that the illumination of the soul will fill up the body.
If we are inside a room and can't see the sun in the sky outside, we can still infer its presence by observing its symptom, sunlight. Similarly, even though we are not able to see the soul inside the body, we can still infer its presence by observing its symptom, consciousness. The Amazing Soul, non-material. According to Vedic wisdom, the soul is essentially non-material, meaning it is not made up of matter and hence cannot be affected by matter.
नैनं छिन्दन्ति शस्त्राणि नैनं दहति पावकः न चैनं क्लेदयन्त्यापः न शोषयति मारुतः.
The Bhagavad Gita makes this point very categorically clear in chapter 2, verse 23. It states, "The soul can never be cut to pieces by any weapon, nor burned by fire, nor moistened by water, nor withered by the wind." In this verse, the Bhagavad Gita gives us a vivid sense of the spiritual nature of the soul.
So there's many sort of key verses in the Bhagavad Gita that describe this, particularly in the second chapter, because it's in the second chapter that Krishna really begins his argument with Arjuna as to why he should fight this battle. And his first point that he makes is that it's a fact that no one really is going to die anyway. Even if you slay the body, you're not destroying the soul. It will just simply go somewhere else into another body. So he begins to develop Krishna begins to develop a perspective or a point of view on what the nature of this thing called the Atman is. And the nature of the Atman is that it's, as I said, it's eternal. It's totally unaffected by the body and by the mind. It's entirely different or separated from them. Anything that happens to the body or to the mind is not in reality happening to the self.
The statement that the soul is not affected by the various common agents that affect the material body, that is, weapons, fire, water, and wind, conveys an understanding of what it means for the soul to be beyond matter. the amazing soul, indestructible. The Vedic wisdom explains that the soul is by nature indestructible. It cannot be destroyed.
Avinashitu tadvidhi yena sarvamidam tatam vinashamavyayasyasya na kaschit kartumarhati.
It states, that which pervades the entire body you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul.
It is the mortal body frame, that disintegrates, that disappears, but not the soul. Eternal consciousness, you could say. So the consciousness persists in there. And with this consciousness would persist even the impressions of the earlier births. And whatever we have been doing, so their good or bad effects. That is what we call as the karma, karma bhoga. That one has to realize.
Thus, the soul is eternal and is not subject to the destruction that is inevitable for the material body. Even after the body is destroyed, the soul lives on and on. The amazing soul, spiritual entity. The Vedic library states that the body and the soul are fundamentally different.
Vasamsi jirnani yatha vigaya navani grinnati naroparani tata sharirani vihaya jirnani anyani samyati navani dehi.
Here in the 22nd verse of the 2nd chapter, the Bhagavad Gita states, as a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones.
It's a very powerful simile in which we throw out clothes which are of no more use to us and take on and rejoice in new ones. So the death is not really a time to feel sad. We're only discarding stuff which we don't need anymore and which we really are moving on to bigger and better things and nicer things. And that's meant to comfort all of us. But the Bhagavad Gita is probably the central place one would go to when one thinks about eternal life, the reincarnation, as well as the end to the process of reincarnation. The cycles of coming and being and dying come to an end at some point, and that is moksha, of course. So the Bhagavad Gita would be the classical center, the place to go to for all these ideas.
By comparing the material body with a dress that is periodically discarded or replaced, the Bhagavad Gita highlights the temporary nature of the relationship between the body and the soul. The impermanence of this relationship underscores that the body and the soul are fundamentally and categorically different entities. It is this radical difference between the body and the soul that makes possible the transfer of the soul from one material body to an entirely different material body, a transfer that is essential for reincarnation to take place. The amazing soul, atomic in size. The soul is extremely small. The size of the soul is indicated in another important book in the Vedic wisdom tradition, the Svetasvatara Upanishad 5.9. It states, when the upper point of the hair is divided into 100 parts, and each of such part is further divided into 100 parts, each such part is the measurement of the dimension of the spirit soul. In other words, the soul is extremely minute in size.
So the Shvetashvatara Upanishad describes the soul as, I think, one is like a tip of a hair that's been cut in 10,000 pieces. Again, not clear that these are really meant to be literal descriptions of the size of the soul. Technically, the soul doesn't have any material dimensions whatsoever. As I said, the general view is that whatever is the nature of the soul, it's entirely different than everything material, and it's only within material realm that we can talk about size or dimension or things of that nature. So these may be more ways of saying it's really, really, really fine. It's not something you're going to be able to discern with your eyes. It's not something you can grasp directly. If you're searching out the soul using physical eyes, you're not going to be able to find it. I think that's the point that the Upanishads are trying to make. Not that it literally has some type of dimension.
So let us reflect for a moment. Who exactly are we? We are the eternal spirit soul, 1/10,000th of a tip of a hair. Isn't that a humbling thought? The amazing soul, eternal and individual. Another key characteristic of the soul, according to the Vedic wisdom, is that it is eternal and always an individual. Here in the 12th verse of the 2nd chapter, the Bhagavad Gita explains,
Natvevaham jatu nasam, natvam neme janadhipaha, nachaiva na bhavishyamaha, sarve vayamatah param.
Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. This verse asserts that individuality is an eternal feature of all living beings. Is this eternal individuality a feature of the body or of the soul? It cannot be a feature of the body because the body is perishable. Therefore, eternal individuality is a feature of the soul. As souls, we remain individuals forever, even though the bodies we occupy perish one after another. The amazing soul. Why is it amazing? The Bhagavad Gita describes the soul as being amazing.
Ascharyavat pashyati kaschidedam, ascharyavat vadati tathaiva chanyaha, ascharyavat chainam anyashrunoti, shrutvaapyenam veda na chaiva kaschide.
It says so in the 29th verse of the 2nd chapter. Some look on the soul as amazing. Some describe him as amazing, and some hear of him as amazing, while others, even after hearing about him, cannot understand him at all. Why is the soul called amazing? One reason is the mind-boggling variety of the bodily habitats that it can enliven. The fact that the atomic soul is within the body of a gigantic animal, in the body of a gigantic banyan tree, and also in the microbic germs, millions of which occupy only an inch of space, is certainly very amazing. The minute soul powers not only the tiny body of a germ, but also the gigantic body of a whale. Owing to a gross material conception of things, most people in this age cannot imagine how such a small particle can become both so great and so small. The amazing soul. Location.
This is a very interesting question. Where exactly is the soul located within the body? Yeah, in general, it's going to be, they talk about it located more in the heart region, which is interesting because generally in Western views, it's understood that whatever consciousness or mind is, it's somehow located in the brain or the head area. But this may also just be a sort of metaphorical way of describing it. It's not, the soul is not, the Atman is not really located in physical space at all. It's not reducible to space. It's because space is a material element. In the descriptions of the natural physical world, in a text like the Bhagavad Gita, it defines space as one of the material properties. And at the same time, it is saying the soul of the Atman is entirely different from those elements. So it's not really located in a literal sense anywhere in space. Nevertheless, it does inhabit or find itself in a particular, like we're here. Consciousness is here.
The Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.9 gives us the precise location of the soul within the body. The soul is atomic in size and can be perceived by perfect intelligence. This atomic soul is situated in the region of the heart and spreads its influence over the body of the embodied living entity. We may wonder what happens to the soul when the heart is transplanted. The Vedic wisdom tradition answers that the heart is the seat of the soul, just as the chair is the seat of a person. When an old chair is replaced with a new chair, the person doesn't get replaced. The person just shifts to the new chair. Similarly, when an old heart needs to be replaced with a new heart, the soul doesn't get replaced. It just shifts to the new heart. The amazing soul, intuitive essential nature of the soul, eternal. Sustained reflection can help us intuit the essential nature of the soul. Vedic wisdom states that the soul is by its very nature Satchit Ananda, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Is this eternal, enlightened, and ecstatic nature of the soul expressed in any way in our present bodily existence? Let's analyze the first aspect of our nature. Eternal. Eternality. Normally, all of us long to live forever. We can hardly consider the prospect of a future in which we won't have any part to play, in which we won't exist at all. We instinctively recoil at the thought of our own mortality, and we are not alone. Even the tiniest of creatures displays the most amazing skills to avoid death. This universal longing for life is all the more remarkable when contrasted with the verity that death is the most unchangeable and undeniable of all the facts of life. All physical bodies are doomed to mortality. They are born with a death sentence, an expiry date written on them. If we are just our physical bodies, then why do we have such a deep-rooted desire for something, eternal existence, that is so utterly unnatural, nay, impossible for the physical body to obtain? How does this deep-rooted longing originate in a world that demonstrates its inevitable frustration ubiquitously in our own and others' dying bodies? The Vedic wisdom tradition answers that this longing comes from the innermost essence of our being, the soul, which is by nature eternal. We long to live forever because we, as souls, are eternal.
There's very little that all Indian religious thinkers would agree on, but I think we can say that a sort of pan-Indian view is that the nature of the soul and the nature of the self is that it's eternal. And anything that's eternal was never created. And if it was never created, that means it must have been somewhere in the past, namely before this particular birth. Western views of the soul are, I've often compared them to a ray, a term in geometry. A ray has a beginning point but no end point, whereas many Indian thinkers, religious thinkers, would say the soul is like a line, in the sense that a technical geometric definition of a line is it has no beginning and no end. And this is certainly the view that the Bhagavad Gita is espousing, that the soul was never born, it will never die, it was never created, it will never cease to be.
The amazing soul, intuitive essential nature of the soul, cognizance. Let's analyze the second aspect of our nature, cognizance or curiosity for knowledge. All of us are insatiably curious. Some people are curious about the latest celebrity gossip, others about the breaking global news, still others about the nature of the furthest stars. Though what we want to know varies from person to person, the principle of wanting to know more remains common to all. Again, we humans are not alone in being actuated by a curiosity drive. Experiments have shown that monkeys work longer and harder to discover what lies on the other side of a trap door than to get food or sex. If we try to understand this curiosity drive in the context of the notion that we are just our physical bodies, we encounter a logical dead end. Our physical bodies allow us only a few small windows to the outer world. Through these windows called senses, we can know only very little of what exists and occurs there. No doubt, we have learned quite a bit about the world using our mind and senses, but the very expansion of our learning has expanded our vision of how much more there is to be learned. Our high-tech probes have helped us learn something about atoms and have also revealed how complex the atom actually is. This has brought into sharper focus not just how little we know, but how little we are capable of knowing. If we are just our physical bodies, then why do we have a hunger for knowledge that we are physically so incapable of satisfying? From the Vedic perspective, our insatiable curiosity originates in the soul, which is, by nature, conscious and knowledgeable.
The Upanishads, may be a good place to start with this as well, describe it as it's true, or it's satya, it's eternal, and it possesses cognition or awareness. It's conscious. It is. We sometimes say in the West, "I have a soul," but I think from the Bhagavad Gita's perspective, it'd be more correct to say, "I am the soul, and I have a body." The soul is what provides cognition to an awareness to the body, and it's the soul that is the part of us that is aware, that feels.
The amazing soul, intuitive essential nature of the soul, blissfulness.
The general view of the Atman is that it has ananda. These are terms that are used in the Upanishads and Vedanta. It has bliss.
Let's analyze the third and final aspect of our nature, blissful. All of us are instinctively happiness-seeking, be it through indulging in sensual pleasures, performing heroic feats, participating in life-risking sports, watching TV soap operas, reading literature, hearing music, or playing video games. Pleasure is what we constantly seek. Again, studies of animal behavior have shown that animals too strive for pleasure. Yet, the physical body allows us very few avenues for pleasure. These avenues are limited to the contact points of the senses and the things that give them pleasure. And the same body can cause us pain through practically each one of its organs. The number of bodily pleasures are few. The number of bodily diseases and distresses, numerous. Indeed, the ways in which the body can inflict pain far outnumber the ways in which it can yield pleasure. If we were just our material bodies, then why would we have a thirst for pleasure that we are physically so ill-equipped to quench? The Vedic wisdom tradition responds that our thirst for pleasure originates in the joyfulness that is inherent to the soul. Thus, by soberly reflecting on the contrasting natures of our innate longings and our bodily trappings, we can get a glimpse of the nature of the soul. Some of us may wonder, if I am actually immortal, then why don't I feel indestructible? Why do I feel so susceptible to destruction? The answer, the Vedic wisdom tradition says, lies in the depth at which the soul is buried beneath a nearly impenetrable mass of misconceived notions and misdirected cravings. Our past prolonged actions under a materialistic conception of life have created deep impressions on our psyche that have almost entirely obscured our awareness of our spiritual identity.